Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvashe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so happy Ram Navami, Hare Krishna. So today we are celebrating, of course, the divine appearance day of Sri Sri Ram Chandra. And this is a very fun day to celebrate because it's rather interesting. We are, of course, at a temple which is named ISKCON Sydney. And what does ISKCON stand for? Who can tell me? Yes, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And yet here we are today celebrating Ram Navami. So, why then would we celebrate Ram Navami, right? If we are devotees of Krishna, what position does Ram Chandra play for us? What sort of significance can he have for us? This is something that I've always found rather interesting. Because when we read the Srimad Bhagavatam, which hopefully we do, when we read it, we'll find that there are a lot of descriptions of the many avatars of the Lord, right? We hear many chapters about Varahadev, right? We hear a whole canto about Nrsingadev. Nearly a quarter of it is about Sri Bhagavan Krishna. But does anyone know how many chapters we have about Lord Ram Chandra? 0? That's a bit low. Yes? 3? Well, you're better than he was. What do you reckon? You were really close. Go one down or one up? 2, right? We have 2. We also have scattering here and there. We find other mentions, but we really only have 2 chapters which really focus on Ram Chandra. So, it can be a little, we can wonder a little bit, what is the significance of Ram Chandra? We have Ram Chandra and we have Krishna Chandra, right? The 2 moon-like incarnations. But what significance would Ram Chandra have? To answer that, we will discuss, I guess, for the rest of my allocated time on this topic. And we find descriptions that there are 3 main avatars who are called the Purushottam avatars, right? There are 3 forms of the Lord which are called Purushottam. Who can tell me, what does Purushottam mean? Can anyone guess? Yes, the Supreme Person, right? Uttama and Purush. If we say it that way around, sometimes people find it easier. So, we have the 3 Purushottam forms, right? Does anyone know what they are? Sorry? Krishna, yes, correct. The one down. Sorry? Ram is there, but Vishnu is not considered one. Last one is Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. These are the three Purushottam forms. And each one is named with a specific title that explains what they are, right? We have Leela Purushottam, which is of course our sweet Krishna. We have Prema Purushottam, which would be who? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then of course we have Sri Ram Chandra. Does anyone know? What title is he given? Maryada Purushottam. So this is very, very interesting, right? He embodies Maryada. And what does Maryada mean? Respect, yes, that's one. Regulation is another one. Limitation is another one. Dignity is another one. There are many meanings. And so these things are all very, very relevant to us. It is said, you want to pray to Krishna that your child becomes like Ram. That is what people often say. So Ram Chandra, he embodies all of these wonderful saintly qualities. And therefore, because he embodies these, Ram Chandra exists as a very wonderful manifestation of all we should aspire to. Maybe this is the last trivia question and then I'll start jumping into pastimes, so don't worry. What are the 6 opulences that Bhagavan has? Does anyone know? Who here has done Bhakti Shastri? Let's see. Yeah? Yeah? Renunciation? Yeah? Okay, I think I've been trying to pay attention to like the 5 different sources. I think we've all got them roughly, right? So they're these 6 qualities by which we define Bhagavan with. And our acharyas, they describe that there are 3 personalities who fully embody these 6. Okay? Actually, I lied. This will be the last trivia question before we get into the pastimes. Does anyone know who are the 3 personalities who embody these qualities? Now, I'll give you a hint. Mahaprabhu isn't normally listed as one of them, so you can't just copy the last list. Krishna is there, yes. Ram Chandra is there. And the last one, you won't guess it. It's Nrsingadev. These 3. And each one is full, and most full, right? So all of them are full of these 6, and yet transcendentally somehow Krishna is the most full. Ram Chandra is fuller, and then Nrsingadev is also very full. So these 3 personalities are very, very important, right? So now, I'm making all these points to stress the significance of Ram Chandra. And I'm not doing so just to quiz you all. There is a point to be made. Because of these 3 who embody these qualities the most, Nrsingadev, he's a little hard to relate to, isn't he? I do not have many days where I'm half a lion, half a human, right? And we can say, who is the mother of Nrsingadev? It's a pillar, isn't it? We don't have... I don't know about you lot, but my mother isn't a pillar at the very least, right? So Nrsingadev, he's a little bit hard, we can say, to relate to. But Ram Chandra and Krishna, they are very human-like. And that makes them very sweet. Very sweet. Because in many ways we can see more in them. So then we see all of these wonderful things, and we're hearing there are all of these wonderful qualities. But when we hear then, in those 2 chapters that I mentioned about Srimad Bhagavatam, when we hear the glories of Ram Chandra, we hear all of the sort of the condensed version of his very, very famous pastimes, right? And what are those famous pastimes? He assembles a bridge, right? He assembles a bridge, he crosses over to Lanka. We hear all of these wonderful things. And wouldn't we say, those are the glories of Ram Chandra, right? Jai. But what does Srimad Bhagavatam say? These are not the glories of Ram Chandra. Oh, Shukadev Goswami, he's throwing us in a bit of a rut. How do we understand this? And when we understand this, we can understand something more about the lessons we can truly take away from Ram Chandra's pastimes. So, diving into those, we can discuss a little bit. As we know, Ram Chandra, he is the son of Dasharath, right? And what is his mother's name? Yes, Kaushalya. So he was born. And when he is born, as I've said, he has this immense beauty. It's described... Okay, look, I said I wouldn't ask more questions. I'm going to keep asking questions, okay? When he was born, he was so sweet and beautiful and radiant. Which dynasty does Ram Chandra come in? Sun, right? So when Ram Chandra was born, when the sun rose, it is said that the sun did not set for 30 days because Surya was so proud to see what a beautiful descendant had come up in his lineage. This is the beauty of Ram Chandra. And then when the sun set, it was the moon's turn to rise. And then the moon as well did not set for 30 days. Like this, everyone wanted to have the sweet darshan of Ram Chandra. How beautiful, how splendid he is. And it's said that Ram Chandra, sometimes for days, he would never actually be placed down. Because everyone would be saying, okay, now it's my turn to hold him. Now it's my turn to hold him. Sanskrit, rameti, what does it mean? It means to give pleasure, right? To give satisfaction. And Ram Chandra, he is very much embodying this. All of the devotees there, they're taking their turns and they're saying, now I will hold him. And the soft, we know babies have very soft skin, but we can imagine how soft and sweet the skin of Ram Chandra was. So all of them, the moment they would hold Ram Chandra, we know softness is comforting. And so all of the pains of the material world, they are comforted away by the sweet and soft skin of Ram Chandra. So like this, we hear that Ram Chandra, he has been so worshipable and so wonderful. And he grows up to be, as we know, a very pious boy. It's said, actually, the first time he met Sita, actually was not at the time when he was, doing that thing, right? It wasn't then. Actually, he meets Sita when he's traveling in that general direction, right? In order to visit Janak Maharaj's kingdom. And he's going there and he's walking around with Lakshman, right? And so Lakshman and Ram Chandra, they're walking together. And one day they're walking through. And the area they're walking in is an area where Sita, she is doing her puja to Parvati. And she's doing this wonderful puja. And so her maidservant, right? Her maidservant, she sees Ram Chandra and Lakshman. And seeing them, the maidservant, instantly she begins to burst into tears. How beautiful are these two personalities that I'm seeing before me. And she runs away and runs back to Sita. And Sita, she says, my dear maidservant, what's wrong? What's happened? And the maidservant, once the tears somehow stop, she says, what I have seen I cannot put into words. What nectar my eyes have drunk, it is impossible for this mouth to reproduce that nectar in the form of words. All I can say is the greatest beauty that I've ever seen has been there. So like this, we hear. And so Sita, she becomes very curious. What's gone on here? And then a little bit later, Ram Chandra and Lakshman, they sort of think, what did we do wrong? So they're going behind to sort of see, did we do some mistake? And at this point, Sita and Ram, they make eye contact for the first time. And at this point, Sita, she says in her heart, surely, this will be my husband. And Ram Chandra, he thinks, has Brahma decided to steal the beauty of all of existence and put it into one personality? Has Brahma decided to become a thief and steal all of this beauty and invest it into one person? But at hearing this thought that he had in his own mind, Ram Chandra, he thinks, oh, actually, I have brought such great dishonor onto my family. I am a brahmachari still. And how am I thinking this about some person who I'm not married to? I'm thinking I'm already so deeply in love. And so at this point, Lakshman, he says, he can understand the heart of his brother. And he says, do not worry. He said, it is impossible. You are Ram Chandra. How can you bring dishonor onto our family? How could you think anything incorrectly? Of course, implicitly, he's saying you are what? Maryada Purush, right? So how could you think? How could you think something that is wrong? And so Lakshman, he thinks, surely there is a deeper explanation. And there is a deeper explanation. Because you two must already have a connection, an eternal connection. Because of course, Sita, she is what? She is the potency of Ram Chandra. If we speak in terms of tattva vichar, if we speak in terms of this philosophy, there is an eternal connection. They are always one and different, right? The Shaktiman and the Shakti. So in this way, Lakshman, he says, there is an eternal connection between you two, and therefore you have not thought anything improper. And in this way, Ram Chandra, his anxiety is sort of settled a bit. And then, as we know, there's the big competition with the bow. Does anyone know why this was decided to be the test? The test of who will marry Sita. Because it said her father, yes, you know, with the dust. So what happened once, Sita, she was going around the house and she was dusting the house, right? And one day the bow was there, but there was a lot of dust. We all know, I recently moved my apartment, and I moved where my desk was, and underneath it was the biggest pile of dust I've ever seen in my life, right? So when we have heavy items, they will collect dust underneath them. So in the same way, Sita, she was cleaning the house. And this bow was there, and she was thinking how much dust is underneath. So she lifted it up, and then she cleaned the dust away from underneath. And so her father thought, well, if the husband of my daughter should be able to protect her, therefore he should at least be stronger than she is. So therefore the test will be, at the very least, he can string the bow and fire a shot. And as we know, Ram Chandra does a tiny bit more than that. He goes out and he snaps it. There's another significance of the snapping of the bow. In Vedic culture, it said, you know when somebody's angry at you and they give you an intense look? It doesn't feel too auspicious, does it, right? It's a relatively inauspicious feeling. And it said in Vedic culture, when people were with that level of purity, just by that sort of angry look, just with that angry sort of look, they would be able to curse someone. And what is the way to undo that curse? You would break a twig. You could break a bit of straw, right? So my Bhakti Shastri students, they've just had a test, so I had a whole bunch of straws in my in my pocket, because I'm sure the moment they saw the questions, I was getting lots of those looks. So you would break a little bit of straw. So why did Ram Chandra break the bow then? Because Sita, she is looking at him, and she's looking so intensely. And of course she is looking because she's thinking, oh, I hope he does it, I hope he does it. But Ram Chandra, in the intensity of his love, he's thinking, oh, have I done something wrong? Have I upset this person? She's looking at me so intensely now, she must be upset with me. So in order that I might preserve myself and not have some inauspicious curse placed upon me, I will snap this bow, and therefore I will eradicate any inauspiciousness. And so in this way, he snaps the bow. So, in this way, we hear the wonderful pastimes of Ram Chandra, right? This is his status as Maryada Purush, right? Simply by falling in love with Sita, he begins to wonder, have I violated all these ethical principles? Anyways, we see this then further on. We know the famous pastime, right? Kaikeya, she's not too happy with his rise to the throne, right? And so she makes a request. I'm speaking quickly because we're all relatively familiar, I hope, with the pastimes of Ram Chandra. And so she makes a request that he will be banished away. And what happens at this point? Ram Chandra, he becomes very, very excited. Very, very happy, we all know, very famously. And he says, Father, if you would ask me to dive into the deepest fire, I would. If you were to ask me to drown in any ocean, I would. So simply, I will take this, and I will very happily accept this. Famously, he says, very rare is the opportunity that one can truly please their father. But I'm having the opportunity to please both my father and my mother. So I will go out into exile. And as we know, he goes out into exile. And who follows along with him? Lakshman and Sita. But following him, actually, it is described that when they were leaving, when everyone thought that Sita, she will be leaving, actually it said all of Ayodhya, not just them, but everyone, besides a certain jealous stepmother. All of them were saying, we too will come. Everyone, all the armies, they followed. But Ram Chandra said, I cannot truly fulfill the desire of my revered mother if you all follow along with me, because then I will not have been exiled if you all follow along. So then their hearts all broken, they all return back, and then they enter into the exile. So like this is very, very difficult, very intense, and we see the attachment the devotees have. And so like this, Ram Chandra, he goes out, and they continue living very simply in the forest. And now, one of Ravan's sisters, what's her name? Who can tell me? What? Shurpanka. She comes along and she sees Ram Chandra and she has the same response as the maidservant of Sita, and she thinks, oh wow, now here is such a wonderful person, right? Here is my husband. I know in my heart this will be my husband. And then of course she says, Ram Chandra, marry me. And Ram Chandra, he thinks, of course, I've taken Ekapatni Vrat. This isn't really for me. Go marry Lakshman. He'll be interested. So Ram Chandra says this. And of course, Lakshman is not too interested. And then of course, at this point, she realizes, oh, he has taken Ekapatni Vrat. My obstacle is not my beauty. My obstacle is this Sita. And so she jumps out and goes to attack. And of course we know she gets a bit of plastic surgery done, right? She loses a nose, she loses an ear, like that. And she becomes disfigured. Actually, by some authorities, some literature, it's not mentioned in Bhagavatam, but in some other Puranic literature it says that she actually becomes Kubja in Dwarka Leela. We know Kubja, she's Kujba, she's what's the other name she has? This one isn't a test, I've actually mind blanked. She has the 3 bends. And I forgot, her Sanskrit name indicates that, and I've just forgotten it now. Anyways, so she has this, but the 3 bending form is not like Krishna's, where it's very beautiful. Her one is very hideous, but we know Krishna then, what does he do? He puts his finger and he realigns, right? So it's said because she has this desire, this is the nature of bhakti. Bhakti is not dedicated or dictated by ethical norms, but simply by desire. So she has this desire that I will be able to associate with the Lord. And of course, Krishna, he reciprocates those sort of things a little bit more than Ram Chandra does. So in this way, we hear that disfigurement continues along until Krishna, he purifies it away. So anyways, like this, we hear, but she runs away. And then she runs back to Ravan. Ravana, he hears this, right? And Ravana, hearing this, he thinks, initially he's thinking, oh, what happened to my sister? But then he hears the description of Sita and he sort of thinks, oh, I don't even know who you are. What I want to know is who this Sita is. And so, what does he do? He gets his friend, Marich. And so, he asks him, he says, will you help me? And what does he say? What does he say in response to the question, will you help me? What does he say? What does his friend say? Who can tell me? Does he say, yes, I will? He says, no, I won't. He said, are you crazy? We're going to go and mess around with Ram Chandra? I'm going to die. And then Ravana says, okay, well, if you don't do it, I'll kill you. And then he thinks, again, demons, they can be intelligent sometimes. And he thinks, you know what? Better to be killed by Ram Chandra than to be killed by a demon, right? So then he says, okay, I'm going to go along, right? And then so he takes this form, this beautiful, beautiful form of this golden deer, right? And it's described that the deer is golden with these silver spots all along, until the very tail, which is silver itself. But the tail has a rainbow undercurrent to it as well. And this is a description that is given. So in this beautiful form, we can imagine, right, how Sita felt when she sees it prancing along. And of course, Ram Chandra and Lakshman, they're together. And they see this and Sita says, I want it. I want it. This will be mine. And so, there's a bit of skepticism. But of course, Ram Chandra eventually, under the request of Sita, he runs away, right? And then of course, we know the pastime, right? Ram Chandra, he arrives Marich gets what he wanted, which is to be killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But at the end, he mimics the voice of Ram Chandra. And then he calls out, "Oh, help, help." And then Lakshman, he runs away. Some accounts, they mention the Lakshman Rekha, right? The circle. But we don't find this in most manuscripts of Ramayana. This is a later interpolation. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. But just flagging that. Either way, what does happen is Ravana then he arrives, right? And he takes the form of what? Of a sadhu, a traveling sadhu, right? But when he arrives, he speaks in a way that sadhus, well, hopefully, normally don't. And he says, "Oh, you are so, so very beautiful." And he begins to compliment her like this. But here is a lesson. What happens to Sita? She somewhat believes him. And this is a lesson for us to always take on board, right? Because how many people will claim to be sadhus, right? Especially when we go to India, right? You throw a rock, you'll hit a sadhu, right? No matter what. But are they a sadhu? This is something we must always be discerning. We should always discern, is this person truly a sadhu? Is this person truly living with the qualities of a sadhu, right? So, failing this only in terms of the pastime. We must remember this is all a pastime. We can't critique any of the personalities. Ram Chandra actually, he fought, again I'm mind blanking, Marich, right? The demon. He fought him before, but he shot a non-lethal arrow because he thought he's going to come in handy later on, right? For the pastime, he's going to come in handy. So he doesn't actually kill him. He fires an arrow that just sort of pushes him into the water, right? Puts him out of action, but doesn't kill him. So we have to realize these are the very complex pastimes of the Lord. But still, there are lessons in them. So like this, of course it happens. And Ram Chandra's wife, Sita, what happens? She gets kidnapped. Of course, how many of us have read Chaitanya Charitamrita? Is it Sita who is kidnapped? No. It is a shadowy copy. In the same way in Brahma Vimohan Leela, sometimes we think the Gopas have been stolen. But how can the Gopas be stolen? How can we take the Brajvasis out of Vrindavan? In the same way, this actually happens. Brahma, he only steals some shadowy copies. The same like Sita. And what happens? Then we end up with three sets of Gopas. We have the Gopas that Krishna is expanding as. We have the Gopas who are actually there and they're hidden away somewhere in Vraj, right? And then of course we have these Mayic copies. And they're the ones Brahma stole. So in the same way, it is not Sita. How can a demon touch Sita, right? So, like this, she is kidnapped away. And kidnapped away, we know this causes a lot of pain to Ram Chandra. Lots and lots of pain. Ram Chandra, he begins to become overwhelmed by these pains of separation. And so he begins to go out, right? And he begins to prepare his way to take back Sita, right? And of course, his trusty friend Hanuman is there. Hanuman, he is a very, very elevated devotee. Not just for Ram Bhakts, but also in our line. In the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Our acharyas have very frequently glorified Hanuman. Who can tell me, what does Hanuman embody? He embodies something. Sorry? Devotion, yes, but a specific type of devotion. Yes, Dasya Ras, right? So he embodies that. And even in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, we hear a description. Narad Muni, he sees this Brahmin. And this Brahmin, he's giving some nice donations, sacrifices to Krishna. And Narad Muni says, "Wow, you're such an elevated person." Brahmin says, "Don't talk about me. Go to Maharaj Indradyumna. He is very elevated." And it goes like this, and then they go, and then he goes to Brahma, and then Brahma says, "Don't even tease me like this. Go to Shiva. Shiva, don't even tease me like this." He goes to Prahlad, and he goes like this, and then we reach Hanuman. And once he comes to find about Hanuman, how does he attract him? He goes chanting. Well, what does Narad Muni play? His veena, right? And what is he normally singing? What does he sing? Narayan, Narayan, right? But this time he is singing something very different. He's singing Rama, Rama, Rama. And the moment he plays that, we all know, there's an old ISKCON song you can hear if you want. Narada Muni, the transcendental spaceman. So Narad Muni, he's flying through and he's singing Rama, 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 like this, right? And what happens? Hanumani hears this and he thinks he can't even contain his excitement. We know Hanuman, he's not too bad at jumping, right? And he jumps up and he catches Narad Muni mid-air. Narad Muni isn't even able to land. He catches him and he embraces him. And he says, "Thank you so much. You have brought my Lord to me." Because of course, Ram and Ram Chandra, Ram Nam and Ram himself, is there any difference? No. So like this, we hear. And then we hear wonderful glorifications, right? So Hanuman, he's very important and he plays a role in our line as well. So of course, Hanuman, he helps Ram Chandra out, right? And by doing this, he then goes and he spies out. He spies out where Sita is, right? And when he returns, he says, "Oh, she's so skinny. She actually, I forgot what it is, but some Ramayans, they say she looks like a Sanskrit student." Which I always find funny because I studied Sanskrit and I just gained weight. So I didn't get much out of it. But back in the day, when you were to study Sanskrit, there would be a lot of austerities as well. And so because of that, she had slimmed down a lot. Because Ram Chandra, he was thinking, how can she be taken away from me? How can she go away? I am hurt. Did she run away? And this way, Hanuman, he confirms. He says, no. She is just feeling intense pain in separation from you. The only thing that keeps her pran together with her body is she is remembering all those sweet times, the time that you broke the bow, right? That first time she saw you, right? She's remembering all of these things, and these things are keeping her together, right? This is a point that is often made in our line. We can remember somebody who is in front of us, kind of, right? But when somebody is away, and if we have genuine attachment, then we will never forget. This is the peculiarity of love. In absence, it is so much stronger. I'm forgetting now which Goswami, but he says that lamps, right? If we have a lamp, right? If we have a lamp in the middle of the day, how bright is it? Not so bright at all. But when you have a lamp in the middle of the night, then it can illuminate a whole room. In the same way we have the attachment that Sita has, right? In this moment of despair, it is lighting up completely. And therefore it is drawn out. So like this, we hear. Now, what has gotten everyone into this problem? Who was Kaikeya listening to when she came up with her very splendid ideas? Who was she listening to? Who poisoned her mind? Who can tell me? Sorry? Mantra, And what was she speaking to her? Was she speaking Hari Katha? Was she speaking the glories of Ram Chandra? Was she speaking about Srimad Bhagavatam, the glories of the devotees? No. So, why are we in this position? Because she was hearing all of this nonsense, all of this prajalpa, all of this nonsense. I was going to say a heavier word, but I thought better not to say it on the Vyasa-san. So, she's hearing all of these things. And this has got us into the problem. The same thing I was saying before. We must discern who is sadhu, who is a person who is reliable. In the same way that Sita was victim to that, in the same way she was victim as well. So we must be careful who we hear from. We must also be careful what we are hearing. And we must also be careful what we are speaking. Words are so powerful. Words can do things that nothing else can, right? Whenever dictatorships come into control, what's the first thing they do? They burn books, they ban media, they do all of these things because words are much more powerful than anything else that can exist. And so, again, then, where do we find the intensity of words being criticized? Well, actually, throughout the pastimes. But we find this with Sita. Because why does Lakshman leave her side? Why? Because in her moment of pain of hearing Ram Chandra's voice, she says, go, you're only here because you want him to die so you can marry me, right? What nonsense, actually. How untrue is that of Lakshman? We know that later on, when the jewelry was discovered of Sita, right? They said, is this Sita's? And what did Lakshman say? I don't know. I can only recognize the ankle belts because this whole time I've never looked up further than the lotus feet of Sita. This is the chastity that Lakshman had. So these words, they are not true, but in the haste of the moment, she speaks these things. And therefore we can see who we hear from, what we hear, and the words we speak are very, very important. So like this, we are hearing all of these details. So as it goes along now, Ram Chandra, he's getting ready, right? He's getting ready to return. And what happens? He's going along. And here's an interesting thing. How does Hanuman get to Lanka? How does he get? He jumps, right? Is Ram Chandra capable of jumping that far? Oh, I'm a bit of controversy. Well, yes. I mean, otherwise he wouldn't be Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, would he? Right? But why doesn't he jump that far? Why does he go through the effort of having all of these rocks placed down? Yes, he's playing human-like pastimes. That is very good. That is one aspect. Can anyone think of any other aspects? Yes? Sorry? Carries whole army. But does Ram Chandra need an army? You get what I mean? Does Ram Chandra need an army to conquer? Yes? You're getting close. What?
It was set up by Lord Hanuman.
Yeah?
And he wanted to give him the credit.
Exactly. Because Ram Chandra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we sometimes sing, in Damodarashtakam, we sing about how it is the glories of Damodar that are spread. And because of those glories, all of the devotees are put into bliss. But actually, when you see the Sanskrit, you can actually read it the other way around. That actually it is the glories of the devotees that are being spread, and therefore Damodar, he is put into bliss. So in the same way, Ram Chandra, he is thinking, do I want all of this glory? No, I want to show the glory that my devotee is even greater than I am. And so because of that, Ram Chandra needs a bridge, but Hanuman does not. So of course we know, I always have to be cognizant of the time. We know that Ram Chandra, then he goes and he gets very angry that the bridge is not happening, and then it does happen, and then he crosses along. And very nicely he goes and he has a nice little fight with Ravana, right? Now sometimes people get a little bit confused, because what happens when you get killed by God? What happens when you get killed by Bhagavan? What happens? You get liberation, right? Sayujya. Huh? But does anyone know what happens to Ravana after he gets killed? What happens to him? What's his next birth? Kamsa? No. Shishupal. He becomes Shishupal. Now this is very confusing. He's being killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why is he taking birth again? Surely he would have attained liberation. He's been cursed. Yes, that is definitely one aspect of the pastime. Because what was his previous birth? Sorry? Hiranyakashipu. And who was he before Hiranyakashipu? Yeah, I always forget which one as well. So I just say both. So we hear this. Jiva Goswami, he writes, the reason why Hiranyakashipu did not attain liberation, the reason why, because of course the Supreme Lord, he can overthrow curse if he wants. But the reason why is Hiranyakashipu, what happens? He just sees this big lion and he goes, what's going on? And then he dies, right? He doesn't have much cognizance of what's happening. Then what happens next? Ravana, he's there. And he looks down. And what does he see? He sees a little man with a bow and an arrow. He does not see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Shishupal, Shishupal engages in very beautiful glorification of Krishna, right? Shishupal, he's more than aware of the position of Krishna. And that is why it is at Shishupal that finally he returns back to his original position. Because he has a proper cognizance of who is this personality before me. This is why. So, like this we hear. So, Ravana is killed. And now there's another thing that we often hear. Does Ram Chandra, does he go directly and shoot him in the heart? No, what does he do? But what else? He shoots beforehand. What does he shoot? The heads, right? Now we might wonder, Ram Chandra, you're a great warrior. Why are you dragging this out? Surely you're in anxiety to end this. This is mentioned, I now forget the commentator. But the commentator who does say this, he says that the reason why Ram Chandra doesn't immediately shoot in the heart is because at this point Ravana, what is he meditating upon? He's meditating, oh wow, Sita, she is so beautiful, so beautiful. And Ram Chandra, he is thinking, I cannot even pierce the mental image of Sita. How could I do that? How could I fire an arrow and pierce that mental image that is held in the heart of Ravana? Of course, Ravana is not having an accurate image of Sita. Our acharyas also mentioned this. He just had a mundane sort of lust. And so he didn't conceptualize her properly as Shakti. He saw her as a regular person. For those of us who are more into philosophy, we can say he was a bit of a sahajiya, right? So, because of this, he was seeing like that. But even that was too much for Ram Chandra to pierce. But here's one thing. No matter how lusty you are, it's really, really hard to focus when you're getting arrows through your head. So Ram Chandra, he shoots all these arrows to distract him. And the moment that Ravana is now thinking, I'm really not having a good day today. The moment he thinks that, then Ram Chandra, he fires the arrow and finishes him. This is what happens. And then, of course, so nicely we know they return back. And they all come back. But when they come back, they find, because who becomes the king when Ram Chandra is gone? Who? Bharat does. Oh, okay, yeah. Bharat, he becomes the king, right? So Bharat becomes king of Ayodhya, right? But when Ram Chandra returns, he sees Bharat, and what does he see? We all know Vedic kings. We've all seen, we go through Bhagavad Gita as it is. They've got big golden crowns and everything, right? Does he see this? No, he sees Bharat in a worse condition. In a much, much worse condition than he was in. He sees him with the matted hair and everything. Because what happened? This is also a famous aspect. Bharat says, how can I enjoy this throne when Ram Chandra is gone? And he went to his mother and he said, you are not my mother. From this day on, I will refer to you as queen, but I will never refer to you as mother anymore. And I will never look at you again. And he left the palace and he lived in a simple hut, living with austerities. And it's actually described that at one point she came to him and she said, even the snakes and the scorpions do not wish to associate with me. This is how much Ayodhya was so upset with her, right? Even the snakes and scorpions would judge her and say, you are not a trustworthy person. Scorpions, if you hold a scorpion in your hand, I don't know how many of us would trust a scorpion. So when the scorpion is saying, no, you're below me, you know you're not a popular person, right? So, because of this, she goes and she says, no one will acknowledge me. And he says, this is good. This is your prayashchitta. This is the only way you can even begin to atone for the evil you have done. Very hardly he speaks these words. So Bharati has been like this. But what happens? When Ram Chandra returns, he decides who is the first person he visits. It is Kaikeya. He goes in and what does he do? He tells Bharat, come with me. And this is the first time on the invitation of Ram Chandra, now he has entered in, right? And what does Ram Chandra do? He goes in and he touches the feet, Kaikeya, and he gives his obeisances to his mother. And then what does he do? He tells Bharat, he says, now you go and you do the same. And he does. And then Bharat goes. And suddenly she is so filled with happiness. And not only that, you know who else is filled with happiness? Bharat is. Because irregardless, she is still his mother. But now we can think of something. And we can come back to the question that I posed at the beginning. Right? Not so much the relevance of Ram Chandra to us, but rather why the Shukadev Goswami say that this is not the glory of Ram Chandra's pastimes. Because he says, building the bridge, all of this is not the glory of Ram Chandra's pastimes. What then is the glory of Ram Chandra's pastimes? The glory of Ram Chandra's pastimes is the prem, the love between the devotees of Ram Chandra and the love that he has for his devotees. That is the glory of Ram Chandra's pastimes. That is the glory of all of the incarnations of the Lord. Because what do we see throughout the pastimes? We see Lakshman and Sita, how much love they have for Ram Chandra, how much they're willing to sacrifice to express that love. Bharat, as much as it hurts his heart, he is willing to chastise his mother and live away from her in order to express the prem and love he has for Ram Chandra. Ram Chandra, look at him. What did he do because of the love he has for his father? What did he do because of the love he has for all of his devotees? This is the glory of Ram Chandra's pastimes, and this is what Shukadev Goswami means. We can hear all of these fantastic descriptions and we can relish them, and we should. But what is the true glory? The true glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is that he loves his devotee. And the true glory of the devotee, sometimes we hear people will say, this person is a great sadhu, he can do this magic trick, he can read your mind, he can do this, he can do that, and all glories to them, maybe they can. But I'm not so fussed with that. That is not a glory that we are interested in as devotees. What is the glory of the sadhu? What is the glory of spiritual life? It is love for the Supreme Lord. And this is the answer we can take away. And this is what we can learn from Ram Chandra's pastimes. And this is what Ram Chandra's pastimes have that is pertinent to us. That we can think, what did Ram Chandra do? After Sita, she's no longer present in the kingdom. It is described, we know the famous pastimes. The curse to become the dog, etc., etc. We know all of these, right? But every time he would deliver a justice, right? Every time he would return back and he would simply cry. And he would think of Sita. This is the attachment that the Supreme Lord has for his devotee. And this is what we can learn. We can learn that what is the glory of the Supreme Lord? It is his attachment to the devotee. And this is what we should keep. This is what we should maintain. This is what we should hold on to. This is the purport of Ram Chandra's pastimes. So, Ram Chandra, Maryada Purushottam, he has manifested all of that. And furthermore, he can teach us in a way that is emulatable, right? In many ways, sometimes we can say, Krishna is able to get away with all that he can because he already did all of the rules and regulations as Ram Chandra. No one will think, oh, Krishna, he just doesn't have self-control, right? Sometimes people might think such blasphemous thoughts, but they can't. Because as Ram Chandra, how much did he follow every single rule and regulation to the T? Like this. So, Maryada, it is very relevant. And we should not think then, we are sometimes, of course, not sometimes, hopefully all the time, we are thinking about the prem that Krishna is experiencing and the prem that the devotees are experiencing. And in our love and attachment, we might think exclusively, and we will think that only Krishna is experiencing such intense love for his devotees. But this is not true. It is not just the Prema Purushottam who is experiencing such intense love, but also the Maryada Purushottam. And so these qualities are very relevant to us. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we can, even though I was saying he is Prema Purushottam, right? In many ways, he also is a Maryada Purushottam, right? Who followed the regulative principles more than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he would be invited to speak to kings, and he would say, even speaking to a king is like putting a black spot on a white cloth. It will destroy all of my regulation. So again, we find this principle again, that Maryada is not lost, right? It is maintained in Krishna, because Mahaprabhu is no other than Krishna. But that Maryada is no violation, again, of Prem. So, I guess I have a few more points, but I've been told that on festivals, sometimes people like to ask questions. If there's no questions, I'll make a final point, but yeah. Maybe he did. I can't remember. If he's a Kshatriya, he might have. But yeah, I haven't looked into it. But there would be no issue if he did. Because it's not against Kshatriya codes to eat meat. Kshatriyas, to be strong, will eat meat. They can also hunt. If you're a Kshatriya, you can. You get what I mean? Of course, then, I'll elaborate on that more. If you're a Kshatriya, you can follow that injunction. But we as devotees are not aspiring to be Kshatriyas. We will speak about Varnas, but Varnas aren't really particular to us, right? So it's not really an instruction for devotees, right? In general society, a Kshatriya is allowed to eat meat. But for devotees, we have the high principle. Once, Srila Prabhupada was asked, what is the role of the Vaishnav in Varnashram? And Srila Prabhupada said, oh, why you are falling down into Varnashram? So, Varnashram rules don't really pertain to us. We establish them in order to give a nice foundation for society, in order to engage people, in order to give a conducive environment for bhakti. But we are not bound by Varnashram. Bhakti destroys all rules. Yeah. Yeah? There's no more questions. I'll wrap up on a final point. Okay. So, to conclude then, we hear a lot, How often do we hear the concept of Ram Rajya, right? We hear it all the time, right? Let us have Ram Rajya, let us have Ram Rajya, right? And it's often thrown around as this political reality, right? Let us turn this government or let us turn this nation into a Ram Rajya, right? But the problem is with this, now that we have heard a little bit about the pastimes of Ram Chandra, is Ram Rajya a political reality? Is it a material reality? No. We will not get Ram Rajya through any sort of means besides the hearing and speaking of Ram Katha. By hearing the pastimes of Lord Ram Chandra, then that land will come. Because what defines Ram Chandra's pastimes? Again, Shukadev Goswami says, the special part of Ram Chandra's pastimes is not even his nice rule. It is the prem. So how will we get Ram Rajya? We should aspire to have Ram Rajya. But how is it established? It is not established by any maneuvering, by any sort of material adjustment. It is established solely and purely by inculcating this prema, by spreading this prema. And therefore, the best way to establish this is to relish Ram Chandra's pastimes. And also, the best way to relish Ram Chandra's pastimes is through this movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And when we chant this mantra, we can aspire and hope that we too will be able to experience that prem, which is all that makes Ram Chandra's pastimes so special. So, on that note, we'll conclude. Yeah. Good point. Very, very nice question. So, it depends who's chanting. You'll find in some sampradayas, they will chant it and they will mean Lord Ram Chandra. However, Srila Prabhupada says this is fine, right? But this is not the highest conception. Our acharyas say that Rama can refer to Balaram. It can also refer to Radhika Raman as an abbreviated form. So in general, we take the term Ram to either refer to Balaram or to Krishna himself. Ideally to Krishna himself. So yeah, it's not wrong to say it refers to Ram, but definitely in the mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we would say it refers more to Krishna. Okay, Shri Shri Ram Chandra ki Jai, Shri Shri Ram Navami Mahotsav ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bo. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki Jai.